Okay, welcome everyone to the Reed and Christine Halliday Executive Lecture Series. Our speaker today is David Bradford. David Bradford is a proven business leader with over 30 years of experience. Mr. Bradford has played a significant role in the growth of the world of information technology. Today, Mr. Bradford serves as CEO of HireView, a cloud-based digital interviewing platform that is revolutionizing how interviews are conducted in corporate America. Prior to HireView, Mr. Bradford served as CEO of Fusion.io until April of 2010, after which he assumed the role of chairman of the board and subsequently chair of the company advisory board. David was named the Executive of the Year in the state of Utah for 2010, Trustee of the Year of the Utah Technology Council, and among the top 100 most influential people in the state of Utah. Fusion.io went public on the New York Stock Exchange in June 2011, and in October 2011 was named Barron's Top Tech Stock Pick for 2012. He is also well known as an expert in social media and speaks and consults frequently on the topic. He is married to the lovely and talented Linda Bradford, a PhD candidate herself. Linda refers to her husband as the human internet. Please join me in welcoming David Bradford.
Thanks, Eugene. I appreciate it. It's great to be with you. Are we picking up this microphone? You got it? Okay. Let me know if you have problems hearing and so forth. Well, listen, it's an honor to be here today. I've already seen a couple of great friends. Ava, who happens to be up in the audio-visual booth. Everybody wave at Ava. Hey, Ava. And John Clark, who's both of whom are members of my local church congregation. And so it's fun to be here and fun to be among friends. I actually served on the board of trustees of this august institution for 8 years, up until 2004 when you were UVSC, and served with Kerry Romsberg and Bill Cederberg, among others, in that role. So I have fond memories and recollections of my association with this great university, now university. Very exciting. Today we'll talk a little bit about how to create, sustain, and build a billion-dollar network. And the billion-dollar references come from several experiences that I've had. We actually took, I was an executive for 15 years at Novell from 1985 to 2000. And we took that company from $40 million in annual revenue to actually $2.2 billion in annual revenue, and grew that and became one of the largest software companies in the world. In fact, little known fact, back in the early mid-1980s and the early 1990s, the three largest software companies in the world were, who can name the three largest software companies in the world in 1989? Microsoft is one. How about Novell and WordPerfect were the two other largest software companies in the world, both located right here in Utah County. So today we think of Oracle, we think of SAP, we think of Microsoft, we think of these big software juggernauts. Well, you know, back in that time, back in the day, two of the three largest software companies in the world were located within 5 miles of each other right here in this valley. We have a tremendous background of technology and infrastructure in this state, lots of skilled engineering talent, lots of great managers that have come up. Subsequently, we've had wonderful successes with companies like Omniture and Altiris and so forth, and more recently Fusion.io. We took that one public in June of 2011 to some acclaim. We'll talk a little bit about Steve Wozniak. Steve Wozniak, who knows who Steve Wozniak is? I see a lot of Apples in the crowd, and I see some people that are actually operating an Apple computer that didn't raise their hand when I asked who Steve Wozniak was. You would not have that computer today but for Steve Wozniak. Steve was the engineering talent and co-founder of Apple along with Steve Jobs. So there were the two Steves, Steve Wozniak and Steve Jobs. And I actually hired Steve Wozniak as the chief scientist for Fusion.io. And he remains in that capacity today and continues to contribute to that little Utah-based technology company. Think about it. The founder of Apple, the chief scientist for a little Utah-based company by the name of Fusion.io. Kind of fun. And so that goes a little bit to the billion-dollar network we'll talk about. When we went public, it had a $1.7, $1.8 billion valuation associated with the company. So we like to talk about billions. But this just didn't happen. I grew up in a very, very small town in Montana, a place called Red Lodge. And Red Lodge is a town of 2,100 people at about 7,200 feet in elevation in Montana. And very small high school. My graduating class had 42 kids. I remember coming down to Brigham Young University in 1969 as a freshman, and they had 25,000 students at the time, and I was just kind of awed by the whole experience being from this small town. But nevertheless, I went to BYU, graduated from the law school there in 1977. So a lot of my career was associated with the law. I was a lawyer, a practicing lawyer up until 2000. My role at Novell was Senior Vice President and General Counsel of the company. I also had other extended responsibilities associated with things like corporate development, corporate security, government relations, and the like, which kind of gave me an appetite to dive in the business world. I quote-unquote retired in the year 2000 when I turned 50, and I was just going to go off and play golf on the professional senior tour. That didn't eventuate, and I dove back into the world of business and have had a great decade run in various technology companies here in the state. So we'll talk a little bit about that. But in 1976, I was just finishing up my second year of law school. And the big deal after your second year of law school is to seek out and get and retain a second-year law clerkship, right? So after you've completed your second year of law school, you go out and you clerk for the summer at some prestigious law firm or corporation. And the hope is that after that summer of working as a clerk in the law firm, that they will offer you a full-time position. So it was really important and critical for my young family that I get that law clerkship, which would then lead to my becoming a member of the law firm. And so I remember distinctly, it was the winter of 1976. Well, actually, it would have been December of 1975. It was the clerkship for the summer of 76 that I was looking to do. And I had done really well at the BYU Law School, despite having 3 kids and working at the BYU Cougar Eat and flipping hamburgers all day long. I still had managed to be in the top quarter of my class at the BYU Law School. And I was always told that if you worked hard and you did really well in law school, that, there would be a golden path out of law school and you would walk in and you would have that wonderful job that you were so hoping for. Well, friends, it does not work like that. Not always. Maybe if you're in the top 2% of your graduating class, etc., that golden path is paved for you, but not in the top 20%, and I learned that. So what I'd done is I looked around and I saw all of my friends getting these wonderful law clerkships. And I was frustrated, frankly, because I was doing better than they were in law school. Why were they getting the jobs and I wasn't? And so I remember that Christmas, Mom coming down to Provo, and we were talking one day, and she said, I was, decrying the fact that I had been unsuccessful in getting that summer law clerkship. And she says, David, haven't I ever, taught you anything in your life? She says, it's not what you know, it's who you know. Now, we've all heard that kind of trite phrase and so forth. I'll tell you, in 1975, Christmas of 75, that one really resonated with me. I was in law school, but I did not know one lawyer in the universe, right? How was I going to connect into that world? And as I look back on that time frame. The people that were getting all those cool jobs, etc., they had an uncle, a brother-in-law, a cousin, a good friend, etc., that had gone to that firm. They were connected into these law firms. They had formed and established important relationships that allowed them to network into these job opportunities. I had not done that, and I had missed out on an opportunity. But let me tell you a life lesson. And I'll talk a little bit about showing up. We're going to talk today about 6 principles. We're going to talk about give with no thought of getting. We're also going to talk about principle number 2, I think. Okay, well, we'll get some help here in a second to be able to advance my slides. But principle number 1 is to give with no thought of getting. So I suppose the best example of this principle, and I'm going to talk about 6 principles today. Principle number 1, give with no thought of getting. You've probably heard that in your Sunday school class or some religious institution, et cetera, et cetera. But it really resonates with me in my life and the way in which I connect with people. So it was about 3 years ago, I was heavily involved with David Checketts in building a sports fund. Dave was the former president of Madison Square Garden, the Utah Jazz, the New York Knicks, etc. Dave and I had developed a friendship many, many years earlier, and we'll talk a little bit about that. But at this point in time, I was working on this creation of this international sports fund with Dave Checketts. I had transitioned out of Fusion.io and had some time on my hands, so I was helping Dave build a fund that would allow third-party, high-net-worth individuals to invest in this international sports fund, to invest in a sports team, say a cricket team in India or a soccer team in Europe, wherever you might have it. So Dave and I were talking about that, busily engaged in that. One day I get an email on LinkedIn. It was from a guy that I had met probably 1995, 1996, and to his credit, he'd stayed in touch with me on LinkedIn, etc. By the way, one piece of advice that I will give each one of you is to reach out. If you are not active on LinkedIn today, get active on it. That is a powerful tool. You have been given unbelievable tools of social media to build, connect, and stay in touch with people. I encourage you to go out and connect with me. And connect with me on a personal basis. So an email over LinkedIn saying, hey David, I would like to connect with you on LinkedIn. If you just check the box, I'm interested in connecting with you on our professional network on LinkedIn. That's one way of doing it. But it's much better if you write me and say, hey, I wore a green shirt, I attended your lecture today, enjoyed what you had to say, this particular thing was important to me, etc., and I'd like to connect with you on LinkedIn. Personalize your LinkedIn request, etc.
I suspect that this was being recognized as a keyboard, deactivating this, and then
Wow.
it stopped working for whatever reason. I'd say in the meantime, let's just click through the slides with the touchpad, which still works, and then I'll troubleshoot the computer later.
Okay, got it. Okay, good. So anyway, I was in the midst of telling you about Dave Checketts, and we're involved in the sports fund, etc. Transition a little to LinkedIn as a little aside. But this guy had emailed me on LinkedIn. He says, Dave, I met you after Novell acquired WordPerfect, and he explained a little bit again about his background, and he says, I'm looking for a sales job. I was recently, my company couldn't get its funding, so I lost my job at XYZ company, and now I want to connect with you and see if I can take you to lunch and pick your brain on some good technology companies that I can go and be a salesperson for. Well, I was really, really busy, and I can remember my first thought was, you know what, I just don't have time for that. I'd love to help everybody out, can't do it, etc. Thought about it for 24 hours, finally said, you know what, I got to go to lunch anyway, emailed the guy back and says, hey, can you meet me in Maggleby's Fresh on such and such a date, such and such a time, and we'll sit down, we'll do lunch together, and I can tell you, and perhaps I can help you out. So he was very nice. He emails me back. We set up a time. We go. We meet at Maggleby's Fresh, and we have a bite to eat. During the course of the conversation, he tells me a little bit more about his experience in the sales world and information technology. And I says, you know what? Here are the names of 4 CEOs. I remember he had a little yellow pad. I wrote down their names, email addresses, and says, this is a pretty hot technology company. They do this, and this is the CEO. Just email him and say, hey, you know David, and you went to lunch, and you're interested in working for him in sales. So, actually, the good news is for that out-of-work salesperson, it turned out to be a win because one of the CEOs responded favorably. He went and had a job interview, got the job, and so forth. So that was great and thrilled for him, etc. But here is the lesson for me. As we're walking out of that Maggleby's Fresh that day, he says, David, what can I do for you? Thank you so much for taking the time and sharing some thoughts with me and introducing me to these people. Fantastic. But what is it that I can do for you? Remember that phrase. What is it that I can do for you? It's important in your life. And, first time he said it, I kind of pushed him off and says, hey, I'm running to another meeting. Wish you the best. Let me know what happens, etc. He says, no, seriously, what is it that I can do for you? Tell me what you're involved in so I can help you out. And I said, well, I'm doing this sports fund with Dave Checketts. Here's a little bit about what it's all about. We're looking for high net worth individuals to invest. And he paused. And he thought for a moment. And he turns to me and he says, you know what? When I was with WordPerfect, I actually did a stint in the Middle East. Oh, yeah? He says, yeah, I was in Saudi Arabia for XYZ years, driving sales for WordPerfect in that part of the world. And I met a guy, and his name's Jim Phelps. And he says, he's the chief financial advisor for one of the members of the Saudi royal family, Prince Abdullah. Oh, Prince Abdullah, what's his story? He says, well, what I know about Prince Abdullah, he's got a heck of a lot of money, and he loves sports. Well, as it turns out, within 24 hours, I was on a plane to Beverly Hills, or LAX, drove over to Beverly Hills, California, and I was meeting with Prince Abdullah in his home in Beverly Hills, California. Told him about the fund, got him all excited about it, got him committed to a certain level in the fund, etc. Now, when I went to lunch with this out-of-work salesperson, I had no anticipation that anything like that could happen. You are sitting by somebody today that in 5 years, 10 years could have a major impact on your life. You just don't know it already. And so what I encourage you to be is to be curious in your life and to ask questions and to get to know people. And connections will be formed. Trust will envelop. And good things will happen. Everything accelerates with trust. I love Stephen M.R. Covey's book, The Speed of Trust, where he talks about how everything accelerates in a business environment, in a family, when trust exists. When there's an absence of trust, things slow down to a grinding halt. I love it when I see competitors in the marketplace merge their companies together, because my first thought is trust dissipates in a situation like that because everybody's CYAing. Everybody's trying to cover themselves, right? They're worried about their job, etc. And they're not trusting this new company that they're merging with, etc. It just slows everything down. And so to accelerate business, to accelerate your family life, etc., make sure trust exists, etc. Anyway, I'd formed a trusting relationship with this guy, and it turned out to be a great thing for me. Just doing a time check here. So, second principle we'll talk about is showing up. To complete the story of how I got my first law clerkship, So I told you how I was completely disconnected to the world of lawyers, and I can remember those were the days of typewriters and carbon paper and whiteout and so forth. None of you would remember that day. Perhaps you would remember that day, but most of the people in this audience would not remember that day. But I can remember my wife and I sitting down and typing out 50 individual letters to law firms. We had a book that had law firm name and address. We sent out like 50 to Southern California because that's where we wanted to go. And I remember I got 3 letters back saying, hey, yes, we'd like to interview you. And by the way, this isn't the days of email. This is a day you send a letter out and then you wait a week or 2 or 3 weeks, for a reply to come back. Fortunately, 3 replies came back, and we went to Southern California, and I started interviewing with these 3 law firms. Well, I walked in, and what I found out is they were looking for Harvard grads, Stanford grads, UC Berkeley grads, etc. And I got to tell you, I was pretty disappointed after my 3 interviews. And I can remember after the 3rd interview, I was in a tower, a 12-story building. We were on the 12th floor on the corner of Hollywood Boulevard and La Brea in downtown Hollywood. And I was, again, discouraged, got on the elevator. Now I'm riding down the elevator, and the elevator stops on 10th floor. And I looked out, and I saw the name of a law firm that I was vaguely familiar with. It said Ersfeld, Younger. Instead of riding the elevator down, I stepped out, right? So remember, 90% of success in life is showing up. Show up in life. I showed up that day. I stepped forward. I made that bold step out of that elevator, introduced myself to the receptionist, and told her why I was there. And she says, oh, you're here to meet with our hiring partner. I says, yes. And what's his name again? His name's Jim Waldorf. And I says, great. So she calls up Jim. Jim's available. I go back. I interview with Jim. Got that law clerkship for that summer. Went back and was successful there. Got that long-term job with Ersfeld, Younger. Spent 3 years of my initial law career there, and then I got into the computer industry. But anyway, show up in life. The second story that I'll tell you about showing up in life, and this is, again, maybe core to the whole concept of building and networking. And by the way, when I use the word networking, sometimes people think of that term in kind of a negative tone, always just networking to get something or leveraging relationships, etc. Yes, there is a law of reciprocity in the universe, right? If I do a favor for your assistant dean, he's going to feel an obligation in some way, shape, or form to pay back. You just intuitively have that feeling in your life that you want to help other people. So remember that law of reciprocity, but remember to show up. And I'm going to talk about chain of relationships where good things can happen. I showed up in August of, let's see, it would have been, Moti just turned 5. So, yes, in 2007, at the birth of my grandson. Not a big deal. We'll all you'll go to the births of your grandchildren and, have wonderful experience. But while I was there, Dr. Tom Judd, I don't know if maybe some of you were delivered by Dr. Tom Judd. He's an OBGYN here locally. Delivered my grandson Moti, and afterwards he says to me, hey, can I take you to breakfast? I said, sure, right? So I had some time. We went in. I can remember sitting in the Orem Community Hospital with Tom. We had a nice conversation. He says, hey, I got a favor to ask. I says, what's that, Tom? And he says, I've got a son-in-law, Brian Lebrecht. He's from Southern California. He's trying to move to Utah. He wants to establish a law practice out here. You're pretty connected to the local legal community. Is there some way that maybe you could go to lunch with him and give him some advice? So I said, sure, Tom. So I went to, T connected me to his son-in-law, Brian. We go to lunch. We have a nice lunch. And I says, Brian, one of the things that I would recommend for you is to get top of mind, right? It's a marketing term, right? Become top of mind. And the way you become top of mind is be seen out there in the marketplace. And so he took my advice. He went and talked to the Utah Bar Association, and he became chair of the Speakers Bureau for the Utah Bar Association. Good for Brian. I thought that was terrific. But he calls me back about 6 months later in the spring of 2008, and he says, Dave, we have our annual meeting of the Utah Bar Association going on in July this summer, and I want to invite you to be a guest speaker at the Utah Bar Association annual meetings. And initially I'm thinking, okay, Salt Lake City, Grand America. I said, where is this going to be, Brian? He says, Sun Valley, Idaho. Sun Valley, Idaho? What's the Utah Bar Association doing meeting at their annual meetings in Sun Valley, Idaho? He says, I don't know, but that's where they are, et cetera. So I did a little Google search on Sun Valley, Idaho, found out it was about a 5.5-hour drive one way from Provo. And, but I'd kind of committed to Brian to go and speak, right? So I showed up. I showed up July 18th, 2008 in Sun Valley, Idaho to give my little speech. There's probably a group, smaller than this group that I spoke to, maybe 30 or 40 people that day. And now I'm walking out of the venue. And I remember being stopped by someone, a young lawyer, and he was asking me some questions about some of the things that I'd spoken about that day. And we were chatting, and I remember there was a piano bench by where we're standing, and I looked down, I saw a little white piece of paper that said, Utah Bar Association Annual Meeting Keynote Speaker. And I flipped it over. I want to find out who the keynote speaker was. I thought, yeah, it's got to be me. Joking, right? Anyway, turns out it was the inventor of that computer, Steve Wozniak. Wow, Steve Wozniak going to speak as the annual keynote speaker to the Utah Bar Association. I had a choice in life. I kind of had a moral dilemma, frankly. I mentioned golf earlier, and you know how much I love to play golf. And so I was going to go give my speech, and then I was going to run off and go play golf at this pretty famous golf course in Sun Valley, Idaho. It was kind of my personal incentive that I'd built in for myself to drive to Sun Valley, Idaho to speak to this association. And so now I'm going golf or Wozniak, right? Which do I go to, all right? So I decide, you know what? I've never met the guy. I'm going to go see, listen to his speech, and et cetera. It's one of the best decisions I ever made. Little decisions in life can change everything. Crazy, right? So if you go back through some of these chain of event, right? I went to the birth of my grandson, went to breakfast with Tom, went to lunch with Brian Lebrecht, his son-in-law, got invited to go speak to the Utah Bar Association annual meeting. If any of these chain of relationships had been broken, I would have never met Steve Wozniak. I went to his lunch. I came in and I sat down. I see no one's in the front row other than the assistant dean. I would encourage you, if you're going to go someplace, be seen, be in the front row, be visible, etc. Find yourself in a high traffic area. Anyway, so I go down, I sit in the front row. Hey, if I got to be here, I'm going to listen. I'm going to sit in the front row. Sat down. There's probably 500 people. I happened to sit next to a young lady by the name of Julie. And being the natural, gregarious person that I am and so forth, I turned over and I says, Julie, my name's David Bradford. I says, what's your name? What do you do? Et cetera. Well, turns out she was Woz's executive assistant. And after I told her what I had done in the world of information technology, she says, oh, I know Steve would love to meet you. Could you hang around after his speech and I'll introduce you? I said, great. So I met Wozniak and we talked after his speech. And then here's principle number 3 in life, in your business. It's to follow up. And to follow up immediately, right? Remember, if I meet this gentleman in the T-shirt, what's your name? Anthony. Anthony. Okay. He's got his shades on. Anthony, where are you from?
Colorado.
Colorado, which part? Northern Colorado. By Fort Collins, or?
Fort Collins, yeah.
Yeah, okay. Great. Okay, I've already established, a little bit of a relationship with this gentleman. Be curious, but follow up, right? So I got back that night, skipped my golf, went and met and penned out an email to Wozniak. At that time, I was just getting involved with Fusion.io, and I emailed Steve and I said, hey, would you be willing to serve on our advisory board? Now, he probably gets, 50 requests a month to serve on an advisory board or invest in this, that, and the other. But for whatever reason, he emailed me back within 24 hours and said, I would be honored to be on your advisory board. It was crazy, but it worked out, and so forth. So by showing up and then following up, some great things happen. Let me give you another example of follow-up and how it's blessed the lives of myself and those with whom I've done business. Shortly after I became CEO of Fusion.io, I found myself back in New York City, meeting with a fellow by the name of Hilton Von Ziel, Hylton Von Ziel, and his last name's Vonzyl. You can look him up. He's Chief Technology Officer in the Research and Development Group for Credit Suisse, one of the world's largest investment banks in New York. And we were pitching him on Fusion.io and why they should be utilizing our technology in their corporate data center. And afterwards, like I do, I go back. In fact, just a quick grab into the front part of my briefcase, here's business cards. Remember, in life, it's not the number of business cards that you pass out at a particular event that's important. It's the number of business cards that you collect, right? Because once you collect a business card, then you gain a modicum of control. You now have the person's contact information, you can email them, you can connect with them on LinkedIn, etc. You have a way of remembering that person. So whenever I go to an event, I always pick up business cards, I put them on a little clip and toss them in the top of my briefcase, and then later that night or the next day, again to follow up immediately, I email the people. Well, I did that with Hilton Von Ziel at Credit Suisse. And said, Hilton, great meeting with you yesterday. Love to connect with you on LinkedIn, etc. And he accepted my LinkedIn request and so forth. So then I was ready it was about a year ago now, when we began raising money for HireVue, my latest technology gig. And by the way, I was announced as the CEO of HireVue. I was the CEO of HireVue until last month. And I made a personal decision to move to chairman of the board, kicked myself upstairs, and took that young founder, Mark Newman, and he's now the CEO of HireVue. So that's great. Everybody's happy. And it gives me time to come and do speeches like this on occasion. Anyway, Mark's terrific and will do a wonderful job at HireVue. But when we were actively raising money, right, for that company, I was headed to New York City. And I always categorize my relationships based on geography. This is another thing in terms of building your network. When you connect with David Bradford, you'll put him into your CEO subdivision within Facebook or Yahoo Mail or whichever email package that you use. You can categorize people. That's a big deal. And if I have time, we'll talk a little bit more about categorization. Let me finish my Hilton Von Ziel story. So now I have got categories of my friends in New York City. I pound out an email blast saying I'm going to be in New York City on such and such a date, and we're raising money for HireVue, and do you know anyone who'd be interested in investing in this space? Hilton was one of those people that was part of that email blast. Again, I'd only met the guy 3 years earlier in connection with Fusion.io, but he was very kind. He sends an email back and says, hey, do you know Neil Occhiogrosso? He's an investment partner at a firm by the name of Investor Growth Capital. They're based here in New York City, and if you're going to be back, I'd be happy to provide an introduction. I connected with Neil. We went and met with Neil, met with Investor Growth Capital, engaged with them over a 1-2 month period, and eventually they wrote a very, very large check to invest in HireVue. We raised $22 million last summer by virtue of that introduction and the follow-up that I had done with Hilton Von Ziel 3 years later. So the point is, connect with people, follow up with people, good things will happen. Stay in touch is principle number 4. I met Dave and Debbie Checketts for the first time in 1985 in a hotel in Newport Beach, California. And Dave and I stayed in touch after that and eventuated in my becoming an advisor consultant to his sports fund, etc. But how did that happen? This kind of goes to categorization. I had Dave Checketts in my category of sports. Let me just show you that a little bit, because I think sometimes, oh man, yeah, this isn't going to happen. For some reason, this instrument has destroyed my ability to work on my keypad. So watch out for firewalls or whatever it is that got set up here. But in any event, what I was going to show you is I have 5,000 Yahoo connections in my Yahoo database, right? Every one of those people is categorized as CEO, angel investor, venture capitalist, LDS, whatever category I might have, marketing, sales. When I want to hire a new sales executive, yeah, good. So if I use the mouse, and we'll go here, contacts, view contacts. So if I go down, you'll see I have accountants, okay? So if I click on, accountants, I have 35 friends that are accountants. At some point, we'll need to hire a chief financial officer at HireVue. I'll go to that database quickly and efficiently. Here, if I want someone to invest as an angel investor, I have 53 contacts here in my angel investment list. I actually have, if you'll see here on the left-hand side, I have 5 or 6 different angel investor lists, right? And so people are always reaching out to me to invest in their new gig, etc. Or maybe I'm trying to find angel capital, seed stage capital for somebody. I can refer them to one of these angels. And each one of those categories, here's, that's an attorney. Okay, so I have an attorney database of, multiple groups of attorneys that I know. Let's see here. Bankers, CEOs, right? If I want to connect to CEOs, here's 108 CEOs, right, in the area. So that's, when I talk about categorization, I've done the same thing on Facebook. I'm a little manic about this because I've just seen how categories can be such a powerful tool when I need to blast something out. So I had categorized Dave Checketts into a category called sports. And I was headed out to Pinehurst to play some golf in 2008, 2009. And I sent an email blast out. I needed a 4th to participate. Well, I went to my handy-dandy database, went to sports, clicked on that, sent an email blast out to about 100 people saying, hey, I need a 4th. We're going to be in Pinehurst on such and such a date. Are you available? Lo and behold, after not seeing Dave Checketts for 25 years, but having his email database and so forth built into my system, Checketts writes back and goes, hey, love to play golf with you. I'll be down, I can be in North Carolina, I'm based in New York, etc. Anyway, Checketts comes down, and we have been working together on this International Sports Fund. So stay in touch is one of the key things. Principle number 5 is be credible. I remember when Wozniak, I said to him later, I said, why would you have responded so quickly and so positively to Fusion.io? He said, well, one thing was you guys have kind of game-changing technology, looked it up on the web, saw what you were doing, knew of its power. And he says, but I also have a good buddy that used to be in the chief technology officer at Novell. I called him up. I says, what about Fusion.io and what about this character, David Bradford, right? So I hate to think that if I'd done anything to that individual, that chief technology officer who came back and gave me, double thumbs up, how it might have impacted my relationship with Wozniak or others. Never engage in any behavior or that would cause people to question your motives or question your ethics. It's not worth it. You may have a momentary opportunity, a financial opportunity that seems really ripe out there. Don't grasp it. Run away from it. Do what's right ethically. It'll always be a longer-term blessing in your life. So critical. And today, in a world of social media, are you kidding me? When something can be broadcast out so quickly and immediately about bad behavior, etc., it's always important to keep that reputation absolutely intact. A bad act can spread, and really, a single bad act can have a cancerous effect on your career. Avoid it like the plague. Be absolutely credible. My final principle is to work hard. Let's see, this class is over in 5 minutes, right?
Yes.
Okay, I'm going to stop there, but you know the 10,000 hour rule, right? Malcolm Gladwell talked about it in his book Outliers. It was based on a study done by Anders Ericsson, a psychologist, where he found that in a study of violinists and then piano players, they found that those people that became famous or skilled or professional, I should say, violinists or piano players, etc., between the ages of 5 and 20 had spent 10,000 hours on their discipline. 10,000 hours. So it's a 10,000 hour rule. Those that spent 2,000 hours, 3,000 hours, 5,000 hours, they never rose to that level, right? And when they did the study, they studied lots of different metrics. Did this person have a high IQ? Did this person, they examined all these factors. Were they a child prodigy, et cetera, et cetera. The thing that was the most important factor to anyone's success was the work hard principle. They put in 10,000 hours of practice. And so I encourage you to think about that as you want to be successful in your career. Here's an interesting side note, and this one is worth remembering. In the study that they did not find anybody who had put in the 10,000 hours who had not been successful in their discipline. In other words, it's a 1-for-1. You put in that time into something, you are going to be successful at it, right? So anyway, that's the final principle. In the remaining minute or two, I'll open it up to some questions and answers. Any thoughts, questions that are burning? And I'll stay around a little bit. We're going to go to lunch. Happy to have you come to lunch with us, etc. So, yes?
You mentioned a few books. Do you have any other, within your company you inspired readers?
Other books that I would recommend. I read a book recently called, two books. Billion Dollar Network by David Thompson, Billion Dollar Network. And the second book is The Best Business Decisions Ever Made. As it turns out, the best business decisions ever made are not what decisions, in other words, what technology to build, but they were who decisions, who to hire, right? When Jobs got together with Steve Wozniak, he made a great who decision, because Woz was unparalleled in terms of his skill set at the time in building technology like the original Apples. One other question? Yes? I'm sorry, there's lights that are just...
Where do you see yourself in the next 5 years?
I love that question, and I love the curiosity that led to it. I see myself continuing to consult to technology companies and to help continue to build and advise and sit on boards, advisory boards, and those sorts of things. I'll play a little golf in the interim. I've got 16 grandkids. They keep me pretty busy. But thank you, and thank you for your attendance today.
And we have a little gift for you as a token of our appreciation of coming here to UVU.
Woo!
Thanks so much.